Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to talk today about the UK government's Cyber Essentials scheme. I'll just share my screen. Great. So, yes, as I was going to say, the UK government Cyber Essentials scheme, but first of all, a little bit about us. So we are a private company. We work for the UK government on the Cyber Essentials scheme under a contract. So we are currently the sole Cyber Essentials partner for the UK government, and we have been that since April. However, we have been delivering the scheme for the last 6 years, but until April, we were one of 5. In terms of what else our company does, we also have a governance standard called the IASME Governance Standard. This includes the controls of the Cyber Essentials scheme, but goes a little bit further and covers the other things that you would expect in a governance standard like ISO 27000. So it includes a requirement to have a risk assessment, business continuity plan, staff training, backup, all those other great things. It also includes privacy controls. So it includes the requirements on Europe's general data protection scheme. So that's proved to be quite useful for many organizations such as charities. We issue more than 2,200 certificates a month, and we certify about 1,800 companies to Cyber Essentials every month. As a company, we are about to launch 2 more certification schemes, one of which is a counter-fraud certification scheme, and the other one is an Internet of Things security certification scheme. So those 2 new schemes are not with the UK government, and we will be launching them by the end of this year. So back to Cyber Essentials. So why did the UK government decide to create a new certification scheme? Well, when they work with suppliers, they usually used to ask for ISO 27001. However, as many of you will know, although it's a great standard and it's very well recognized internationally, it's often too expensive and bureaucratic for small companies. We found that for the small companies, they often have to take on a new staff member just to maintain the international standard. So this creates a barrier to working with small companies. Another reason that the UK wanted a new scheme was that they had many suppliers with ISO 27000 certificates, and these suppliers were still being breached. And they were being breached for the most basic technical controls. So as you know, ISO 27000 and many information assurance schemes are risk-based. So as long as you understand the risk and you decide to accept it, you can still go ahead and be certified. The UK government did not want this for their suppliers. They wanted to make sure that they absolutely had basic technical controls in place. And so Cyber Essentials is not risk-based. You either have all the controls in place and you can get a certificate, or you don't have the controls in place and you can't get a certificate. So this was because the UK government did not want to contract to organisations that did not have these technical controls in place. And that's why they decided to create a new scheme. So the scheme is owned by the UK government, and it was developed in partnership with industry. It was developed in 2014 and launched in 2015. So the government looked at all the breaches that they had seen over the previous 4 years, and they looked to see which technical controls would have stopped or slowed down those breaches. And that is where the original way that the technical controls came to being. So the Cyber Essentials scheme has only 5 technical controls. As well as trying to make these simple so that companies of all sizes and all backgrounds can understand them, we also tried to make them so that they would not cost money to implement. So for most of the technical controls, you can implement them free of charge. It just takes some time to look at settings and make changes. So Cyber Essentials is required by the UK government for most of its suppliers. So this covers an enormous range of companies, as you can imagine. So we have companies who work for the government in recruitment companies, healthcare companies, cleaning companies, vehicle tracking companies. All these organizations who work for the government have to have Cyber Essentials. We also have organizations like the Charities Commission in the UK that now asks many of the charities to achieve Cyber Essentials to remain on their register, and especially if they're going to receive government grants. So now, often, if you are a charity that receives a government grant, you have to achieve Cyber Essentials. With the Ministry of Defence in the UK, they ask for the whole supply chain to achieve Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus. So this is as far down the supply chain as the Ministry of Defence identifiable information goes. They have to have Cyber Essentials. And then, of course, increasingly, because it's required by government, we are seeing private commercial companies also beginning to ask their suppliers to achieve Cyber Essentials and show them the certificate as evidence. So we have supermarkets and law firms starting to do this. We have also seen some insurance companies asking their clients to get Cyber Essentials before they get cyber insurance. So a little bit more about the Cyber Essentials scheme itself. It is a certification. So you can achieve a certificate as evidence that you have passed the scheme. It's government backed and it only has 5 technical controls. Now, Cyber Essentials is aimed at preventing common commodity level internet threats. So this is not designed to stop sophisticated attackers and attackers that target you specifically. This is just to stop the common commodity internet threats, phishing, hacking, password guessing. However, we are aware that many of the sophisticated attacks often start off with simple attack vectors. And so you would not get your A-team out and the usual most sophisticated tools when you can just get in very easily. And so, although Cyber Essentials will not stop a sophisticated attack, it may well slow it down and make that attack more expensive for the attacker to carry out. So the technical controls are here. I will go through them one by one, but I have to apologize. They are very basic and they're very obvious. But interestingly, most companies do not have these in place. So when you're thinking, when I'm going through them and you think, well, this is pretty obvious, just remember, most companies do not have these controls in place unless you ask them to. So first of all, there is access control. We ask that people do not work in an admin privilege account on a day-to-day basis, and that they have a list of people in their organization with admin privileges. Obviously, you need a strong admin password, and we do not allow account sharing. So you cannot have more than one person using an account with the same username and password. In terms of secure configuration, we say that companies need to close accounts that are not used and remove software that they don't actually need from their endpoints. They need to change any default admin passwords and also disable auto-run features. They need to have licenses for their software, and all software and hardware does need to be supported. So you cannot achieve Cyber Essentials if you're using Windows 7 or iPhone 5. And the software needs to be set to automatically update and be kept updated. So this is the biggest problem that large organizations have, is keeping their software up to date to the timeframes dictated by Cyber Essentials. So in Cyber Essentials, you have to implement all critical security patches within 14 days. So a little bit more about that later. Companies need malware protection. So either, or, and, antivirus, whitelisting, and sandboxing on one of those on all computers, smartphones, tablets. Obviously, it needs to update itself often, set to scan on access, and also protect you against malware on websites. Finally, the last technical control, you need firewalls on your office, your device, and your home. If you have a home office, if you're working from home, as many of us are now, you need to ensure that your router has got the correct settings before you start working from home, or you use a VPN. So you need to obviously change any default passwords to strong ones, understand the settings on your firewall, make sure that they are correctly set, and we have some questions about anyone who can access the settings on your firewall. So those are just 5 technical controls. Hopefully you will see the very basic level that the questions and the requirements are at. So often cybersecurity professionals will say, this is such a low level. This is worth nothing. What is the point? But very interestingly, Lancaster University did a study on the impact of cyber essentials, and you can see the results here. So when they looked at small companies who were attacked by common internet threats, having the cyber essentials controls fully mitigated 70% of those attacks. Only 0.7% of the attacks were not mitigated at all. Very interestingly, the 30% of attacks you can see there that are called partially mitigated. The reason they are partially mitigated is if the patch was available then and implemented, then the attack would have been stopped. So the reason these attacks were not stopped was because the patch was not available, which I think is quite interesting all of itself. So you can see that just these 5 technical controls, when set against common commodity level internet threats, are very, very effective and provide a significant amount of protection. So in terms of the scheme itself, the requirements for Cyber Essentials are the same across the scheme. And you can see that in a requirements document that is published on the government's website. However, there is 2 levels of assurance. So the lower level is a self-assessed with a verified check. So the candidate completes the self-assessment questionnaire. A board member has to sign a declaration to say that all the answers are true, but we require no further evidence. So instead of asking for evidence, we have a signed declaration. And then we have an independent assessor that goes through and marks all those answers. And any answer that is not compliant, they give feedback. Now, if the company passes, that's great, they get a certificate. If they fail, they get to see all the feedback from the assessor, and they have 2 working days to make any changes and submit their assessment without any extra charges. Now, this is a very important step for us because we see one of the biggest benefits from Cyber Essentials is this process where the assessor feeds back to the client the aspects that they are doing wrong. And the client makes those changes, improves their security, and then passes. So this is a very important step. In terms of, and then there's a higher level of assurance, which is called Cyber Essentials Plus. So you still have to do the self-assessment part of it, but then a technical expert will audit your IT systems. So this could be going to your company and doing the audit, or usually nowadays, this can be done remotely. So it is an internal and external vulnerability scan and also an endpoint technical review. So with the self-assessment, we can say it is a fixed price. It is just £300 per assessment, but it does have to be renewed every year. With the Cyber Essentials Plus, because it is dependent on the technical expert doing a full review of your company, The cost of it will depend on the size and complexity of your company. And so we have to give companies a quote when they are interested in that level. Often when companies want to find out about Cyber Essentials and take the first steps, the first thing that they can do is download all the self-assessment questions from our website. So you see here, you can just download it either as PDF or Excel, and you can see all the assessment questions and prepare your company. We say to companies, if you don't need a certificate, you don't need to pay the £300, but please still download the questions and implement as many of the controls as you can. Every control that you implement will improve the security of your company. We have, so IASME ourselves, we don't do the assessments ourselves. We license the assessments to nearly 260 companies across the UK and Crown dependencies. So these companies, most of them are micro or small companies. And as you can see, they are very well distributed across the country. So these are organizations that companies can turn to for advice and guidance, as well as just the assessment. And they are often affordable and local. So we like to make sure that companies can be connected to an organization that is local to them. The Cyber Essentials scheme, because it is owned and run by the UK government, the Cyber Essentials scheme is currently only delivered by UK companies. So although you can be assessed when you don't live in the UK, only UK companies can be assessors. When we look at the size of companies that certify to this certification, we really, really like this. So you will see here, almost 3/4 of the companies that certify to Cyber Essentials are micro or small companies. So they have less than 50 people in their company. We find this is very good because when we started the scheme, we wanted to make sure there was no barriers for small companies. We want small companies to be able to prove that they have cybersecurity controls, but it not be too bureaucratic or expensive. So within that group of micro companies, there are a significant number of one-person companies that get certified to Cyber Essentials without a problem. So we are very pleased with this. For companies that have less than £20 million turnover, they can also have included cyber insurance. So they have to have less than 20 million turnover, they have to certify the whole of their company, and they have to be based in the UK or Crown dependencies. If that is the case, they get asked, do you want to opt in or opt out of the insurance? If they choose to opt in, then it is automatic. They don't need any more money. They don't need any more forms. They just automatically will get the insurance, which lasts for a year. It is underwritten by AXA, which is a very large insurance underwriter. Now, the limit of the insurance is only £25,000, but what it does give them is a phone number for 24-hour incident response, and that is technical and legal incident response. And a number of the organisations that have had this insurance have, I think, been saved because of that incident response phone number. Something bad starts happening, they immediately can ring up and have a cybersecurity incident response team advising them. And that has been very, very valuable to some of them. These are companies that would never usually buy cyber insurance, which is why we include it. So, of course, the main reason for failure for Cyber Essentials is out-of-date software, especially Windows 7, and also actually smartphone handsets. Smartphone handsets go out of support very quickly, and it's to keep buying new handsets. When we look at the scheme as a whole, you can see here I have plotted the number of certificates issued each month, year on year. So the bottom line is 2017, and then you can see each year, and then the yellow line is the current year. You can see where the yellow line dipped right down in April and May. And that, of course, was the effect of the pandemic. But you can also see the fantastic recovery that has happened. And October, our last results, you can see were very, very much higher than on previous years. So we issued 2,200 certificates for Cyber Essentials in the 1 month. So in the month of October, just recently, 2020, we issued 2,200 certificates, and we expect that number to keep going up. But I think for anybody, any government, any organization introducing a new certification scheme, this is an important graph. It takes time, it takes years for people to understand the scheme, get to know the scheme, and start asking for it. And so I know we were expecting the numbers to be much higher in the first year. And of course, now they're much higher, but it just does take time. So in our experience, we have been involved in the Cyber Essentials scheme since it was launched in 2015. And since April, we have been the sole supplier. So we have found that Cyber Essentials, although people think it is a very low level, Cyber Essentials is actually too high a level for most organizations. And this is a very shocking realization for anybody who works in cybersecurity. So many of the organizations who are asked to achieve Cyber Essentials don't even know where to start. And, they have to achieve it. So we have, over the years, realized more and more we need free help and free guidance. We've also found it is very hard, much harder for large organizations to achieve Cyber Essentials than it is for small organizations. One of the main reasons for that is the patching requirements. So you need critical security patches to be in place within 14 days. That's quite difficult to achieve for large organizations. Also, you need all your software and hardware supported. So we come across very large organizations with thousands and thousands of handsets, mobile phone handsets, which connect to their company data. And of course, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, both are out of support now. iPhone 6S is the oldest iPhone that you can have, and it's still be in support at the moment. So this is quite challenging for large organizations. Finally, we have looked and found that for most organizations, they only complete and achieve Cyber Essentials when they have to. Even if we give out assessments for free, they do not do it until their customer requires it. So to look a little bit more at each of those details, the free advice, we give more and more because we find that this really is the key for companies to improve their cybersecurity. So we have a LinkedIn advice group now, just a normal LinkedIn group that anyone can join, and they can ask questions about Cyber Essentials, and also they can see all the other questions and answers that have been asked in the past. So we have found that to be quite powerful. We are just about to launch a Cyber Essentials advice app. So this goes into each of the controls in a much more detailed way and links to very simple guidance about how to implement each of those controls. When the client goes through, depending on their answers, they get sent to different advice. And at the end, they get a to-do list, an action list, which links to all the advice which helps them to put those actions in place. As part of that, and for quite a while, we have been writing how-to documents. So we have tried writing these with our technical experts, and people who are not technical don't understand them. So now what we do is we get a technical expert to write them, and then we get a non-technical person to rewrite the whole article. We are hoping that that goes a little bit further towards helping. We are also trying to create a document which helps guide people to understand what common software is unsupported and what software is supported. This is a very, very big issue for us and for many companies and even our assessors to keep up to date with what is supported and what isn't. We have also commissioned an artist to draw drawings. So these are not diagrams. They are drawings of beautiful drawings which try and illustrate complex concepts within cybersecurity. So, for example, the first drawing has a picture of canals with locks and little small canals and boats on the canal. And this is to illustrate the understanding of firewalls, different firewalls on devices and company boundaries. So we have, and the next drawing will be about cloud. So we're trying to draw pictures to help non-technical people understand some of these concepts. Finally, we employ lots of helpful people. In our customer services team, we usually employ non-technical people, and then we train them in the basics of cybersecurity. They all attend the assessor training course, and they are on hand on the telephone and by email to answer people's questions. Some people get very anxious and upset, and just speaking to a non-judgmental, friendly person can really help them get over whatever barrier they have got and continue to be successful in Cyber Essentials. The issue with large organisations is one that we are currently examining with the UK government. We've got a team of our technical experts and their technical experts to look at what the issues are and whether there is any other way that we can check that the large organisations are protected against commodity internet threats without some of the aspects that they find very difficult. So we're currently doing that review, and that should be published in April. And also, finally, a little bit more about the reason that companies do Cyber Essentials. Often companies, they don't want to be insecure, but the kind of controls embedded in Cyber Essentials take a little bit of time, and they're fiddly. You need to just go through and you need to check settings, you need to change passwords. It takes time, and it's like housework. It's always on the bottom of the list of things to do, even though it's important. And so we find that often companies will never get round to it. It's never the most important thing until a client tells them they have to. When a client says, achieve Cyber Essentials and send me your certificate, they often achieve it very quickly. But it's not until that point that they go through and they put the controls in place. We have found that companies are very reluctant to get started with Cyber Essentials, particularly non-technical companies. They are scared of the word cybersecurity. They think it will be expensive, and they think it will be very hard and difficult. And also they are embarrassed that they do not already have these controls in place. However, when they are told by the customer that they have to get it, then they actually focus on it. They put the controls in place. They achieve Cyber Essentials, often very quickly. And they are so proud of themselves. They realize that cybersecurity is not that hard and they can do it. And so we get a lot of feedback saying, we didn't want to do this, but now we have done it. We are so pleased. We feel better. We feel more secure. And now we are going to do more. And we see companies go on without being made to ask about pen testing, to ask about governance, and to achieve more. So we find that it's often the start of a journey. Just very finally, I wanted to talk about Cyber Essentials in the supply chain. So all the things that I have been talking about are about the benefits to a company for implementing Cyber Essentials, often having the insurance. But of course, if you ask your supply chain to do that, the benefits are magnified. So your supply chain, you would know they would have these technical controls in place. And of course, for the small companies, they would have the cyber insurance. This means that your supply chain is much more resilient and of course helps your business continuity. The thing that we have really learned over the last 6 years is that if you do not ask companies to do this, usually they are not doing it. So we urge you to raise these kind of controls with your supply chain. Ask them specifically to put them in place, because if you don't, then often they're not done. So in summary, Cyber Essentials is very simple and basic, but it is surprisingly effective. And a few small technical changes can prevent 80% of cyber attacks. If you require this certificate throughout your supply chain, of course, you significantly improve your security and resilience even further. As you know, there has been a growing number of cases where attackers have targeted the smallest of companies in a supply chain in order to actually attack the larger customer. And so something like Cyber Essentials will protect you from that, at least to a certain degree. So, and we fully believe that the Cyber Essentials scheme has increased the level of security in the UK. And the more organisations that are encouraged to take it up in the UK, the higher the level of security. So that is all that I was going to tell you about today. I will just end the screen now. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm sorry I can't be with you live right now to answer your questions, but the organisers have got my contact details and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have on the Cyber Essentials scheme. So thank you again, thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of your event. Thank you.